and welcome back to the Publisher Podcast from Media Voices. I'm Esther Thorpe, and this season we're bringing you the best sessions from the Definitive AI Forum for Media, Information and Events, which we held with Flashes and Flames in London at the end of last year. Now, we're nearly at the end of this season if you're all AI'd out, but we're planning some really exciting guests and topics for our next season starting on April the 13th. Each of these episodes is accompanied by a write-up of the key takeaways, and you'll find all of that on our site, voices.media, or you can get it delivered straight to your inbox every Tuesday by subscribing to the Publisher newsletter, which you can sign up for at voices.media. Now, before we get into this week's interview, I wanted to let you know that from the end of February through March, we'll be running a series of AI-focused masterclasses online. These are the ones we hosted in person at our AI event in November, and we got such good feedback that we wanted to run them online for a wider audience. They're all focused on how to get the best from AI in your publishing business, from measuring ROI, optimising engagement and content discovery. They're running every Wednesday from the end of February, and you can book now at voices.media/masterclasses. There's even a special discount for podcast listeners, MV25, to save 25% on the £49 ticket price. So back to this week's episode. It's an interview with Danny Groom, CEO of DMG Media. He's talking to Flashes and Flames' Colin Morrison. He talks about the opportunities he sees with AI and personalisation, the importance of codes and communication, and what they've learned with their AI innovation team, connecting work and ideas up with the rest of the business. Here's Colin kicking the session off.
Danny Groom is CEO of DMG Media, I think the company's called. The flagship title happens to be the best-selling daily newspaper in the UK now. And of course I suppose arguably, the Daily Mail Group pioneered clickbait. I don't know if you'd own up to it quite like that, but Mail Online was attracting attention for all kinds of things online before most of us knew the word clickbait. So what does AI really mean to you guys?
Well, I mean, it's really interesting to hear so much positivity in the panels this morning. And I think for us, or for me personally, I think it's been a journey like most publishers over probably the last 2 years, which started from a point of being absolutely terrified at the prospect of what it holds and the threat it poses to publishers, but slowly, or maybe not so slowly, to gradually realise that it's not as scary as we thought, and that actually there are massive opportunities there. And I think once you get over that fear, I think Christian talked about this, the possibilities are endless, and it's really a case of, I think, not doing AI for AI's sake. That's the most important thing, and to actually think about it specifically from a kind of output-driven perspective, to actually try and achieve things rather than just do things because we can.
So what kind of things are you doing?
I think it's mainly, obviously from an editorial viewpoint, there's lots of things that are going on. I think mainly in the product area that is the biggest space that we're looking at now. And we set up a innovation team about 18 months ago with a view to just kind of giving them space to play and to try and come up with some ideas. And I think it's interesting how they've gone from the space where they're trying to create big things and build spaceships and all the rest of it to where they're now very targeted, thinking very clearly about what they're trying to do, and also working very closely with the newsroom as well.
How big a team is that?
At the moment, it's, I think, probably about 8 people. A lot of them are, alarmingly young. Several of them are only 22 years old. But I think it's kind of interesting. I think this is the bit that's sort of lost in the whole AI discussion particularly about publishers, that you do have these incredibly smart, talented, I hesitate to use the word kids, but very young people who are coming through and doing things that are way beyond my level of knowledge, but are enabling us to sustain our industry and to actually push it forward.
And what kind of things are you heading towards there? What's not too distant future, but a year or two, what kind of AI innovations might you have, and what types of things would they be?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably personalisation is going to be the biggest thing, I think, over the next year. I mean, that's something like everyone else we're playing around with, but I think that could be potentially game-changing as it becomes more and more sophisticated. we've just launched, we've just experimenting with a dynamic paywall, which we've launched in Australia, or we're testing in Australia, which I think that will be a big game changer for us over probably the next 18 months.
And so what does personalisation mean in the context of newspapers traditionally are a bundle of things, same to every person? Do you actually mean that my version of the Daily Mail would be different from yours? Or?
Probably not all of it. I think some of it will be. I mean, I think the interesting trend that we're seeing in terms of publishing is, and I think someone mentioned it in the previous panel, is, we're all moving to a model where we are producing fewer articles. And, I think obviously you alluded to it, but the Mail digitally has been built on, reach and mass publication. And I think because of everything that's happening with, particularly with Google, then we're having to kind of slightly rethink that. And so we are literally producing fewer articles. And I think once you get into that mindset, then you have to think about, you have to be more targeted, and the reader wants to be more targeted. And, I think it's something that more and more publishers are embracing. And, it's just inevitable that we're heading in that direction, I think.
How far, for a business like yours, how far does print get in the way? I mean, I understand the point. You have big selling print newspapers, but it feels like the digital, AR-charged version of these services would be so completely different that it's a bit of a challenge, isn't it? It's a bit difficult, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a challenge, but I think, my perception is that the way the industry is going is that we've been forced, essentially because of what's happening with Google, to kind of rethink our business models. And obviously with the advent of AI as well, and allowing us to, develop our workflows and become more efficient and all the rest of it, I think all of that is creating a kind of flywheel of increased talent and lifting the quality. So I think in some respects it actually helps the print side of things, weirdly. And certainly I think, maybe the print staff might dispute this, but I think we have a very clear idea of what our readers like now because of the way that AI is enabling data and, the personalisation side of it. So I think, perversely, the print product has actually become better and stronger because of that.
The thing in regional news, AI clearly is creating content.
Yeah.
There is. Is there anything like that in your business where perhaps whole chunks of digests or something are coming out of AI?
No, not at all. I really, someone alluded to it in the last panel, I cannot see a world in which a quality publisher can do that. It helps in lots of ways, from research and, automation in article creation, but in terms of the actual content, personally, I think it's not good enough. The Gen AI tools are just not there yet.
But you said yet.
Well, yes, but I think the big pushback against all this is obviously trust, quality, brand. They're all the things that we need to lean into, and they're the complete opposite of a Gen AI tool that's kind of pumping out artificial content.
What sort of code of ethics or conduct do your journalists work under when it comes to AI? Because there's obviously a risk with the flawed AI contributing to a story and so on. Is that tightly managed area?
It is, yeah. It's very difficult, and as the tech becomes more and more sophisticated, it obviously becomes harder. But I think we have a responsibility as publishers, to kind of regulate this and to make sure people are fully aware of it. And we have a very clear AI code which is enforced in-house. So I think anyone working at DMG has a very clear idea of what they can and can't do.
And does AI sort of break down national boundaries a bit? Is it so useful, perhaps, that you can create local versions of things thousands of miles away? Is that a sort of realistic scenario? So where we see papers like yours, but virtually every bit of Fleet Street crawling across the American market, is that the start of something where we don't know where these things have come from and so on. I'm not thinking of it negatively, but making things authentic in another country, in another place. Is that a realistic thing?
I'm not so sure. I mean, I think from a technical perspective, it's definitely possible. And, I suspect there will be a temptation for publishers to go down that road. But I'm just not sure we're there yet. And also, I think, going back to my previous point, that I think it is, it is empowering us as publishers to kind of lean into our very bespoke quality, brand-heavy content. And I think, that will become stronger rather than the other way around.
What are the kinds of steps that you go through? So you've got this team of people coming up with ideas. In a year or two's time, when you look back on this, what will have been the steps to the sort of maximisation of AI, if you call it that? What will it look like?
I think the big thing for me is communication and taking the whole business on the journey with us. And I think the problem, if I'm being honest, that we've had with the previous way we were set up is that they were in a room, in a basement, just kind of making things like mad professors, and there was no connection with the rest of the business. What we're trying to do now is to have, show and tells where they can show what they're working on, and obviously getting feedback. Lots of hackathons, which we've been doing, and just to kind of get everyone to go on the journey with them. Because, as I say, when we first started it, they were coming up with some brilliant ideas, but completely unenforceable. And one or two of them were not strictly relevant to publishers. So I think once you actually connect what they're doing with the output or the desired output, it becomes a lot more efficient and a lot stronger.
Okay, shall we take some questions? Any question?
Thank you, Danny. Really interesting talk. Sorry, Jonathan from Hanson Wade Group. You alluded to the AI code you have internally in terms of what employees can and can't do. You'd like to elaborate what's included in terms of what you can and can't do, and then how you enforce people doing the things and not doing things you're wanting them not to do?
Well, I mean, I can't recite it off the top of my head. It's a very strong, clear guide in terms of sources, in terms of where we expect people not to go rather than where we expect them to go. But it is very strongly disseminated through department heads. I think every desk editor is fully aware of our position. These things are not 100% watertight. We all know that. But I think it's incumbent on us to do the best we can in terms of making people understand that the power of AI, but also the risks as well.
What kind of mistakes have you made, or what kind of learnings have you had during this period? Because by definition, you're touching on things that weren't worth doing, and so on. That's part of life. But can you take us through that as part of the learnings that you can share for the rest of us?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably the biggest mistake we made was believing the hype, and we genuinely thought this was, or at least maybe it was just me, but we genuinely thought that this was going to be the big kind of meteor that was going to blow us all out of the water. And I think you can't run a business and you can't operate from a position of fear. And I think that that was the biggest mistake. And I think that probably the impact of that was that we didn't become first movers, which with the time is a little bit scary, but I think with hindsight was probably the best thing that that we ever did in terms of AI.
And everything we talked about today, when it comes to the news, kind of almost emphasises the sort of multimedia aspect of things.
Yeah.
Watching, listening, and reading text and other versions of things. That's a bit of a challenge, again, for a newspaper with hundreds of writing journalists.
Yeah.
Are you changing them? Are you recruiting different people? Or how are you addressing that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a mixture of both. I think there's lots of interesting changes that are happening, and you see some of the how can I put this, more mature print journalists who are very enthusiastically embracing the new world, and all over TikTok and doing lots of long-form videos, etc., etc. I think the more interesting dynamic is actually from the other end of the age range. And I think what you're starting to see is that people who are starting out as maybe influencers in the broadest sense are now coming into the mainstream. And I think that's something that we'll see a lot more of over the next couple of years, where people who are starting out on, TikTok or Instagram and, perfectly intelligent, good journalists, but slowly they will move into the mainstream. And I think there's one or two examples of that now, and there's a couple at the Mail, which is quite interesting. And my hunch is over the next couple of years, I would imagine within the next 3 years, we'll see, an influencer writing a column in a national newspaper.
And I presume that that's a challenge in itself, because you'll be employing people who are bigger than the vehicle in some eyes, I suppose.
Yeah, I think so. But the important thing is that we kind of take the young audience with us, and whether we like it or not, that's the portal that they see. Through which they see news and they consume news. And so I think the challenge and the opportunity is that we can pull people into pull these young people into our ecosystem and, introduce them to new platforms.
One of the sort of characteristics of publishers generally, but particularly newspaper publishers, is that even when they're doing quite different things, they tend to do them under the same brand name.
Yeah.
So there's a kind of a sense in which the brand was more important than the individual things, which is a slightly perverse thing if you look at manufactured goods or something. Biscuit manufacturers don't, they call things differently to attract different audiences. Are we going to see that in newspapers, do you think? That the Mail might actually be producing something that isn't called the Daily Mail, but is for us?
Yeah, I think it's already happening in some respects. But I think the important thing is that you retain the connection to the brand, and it might not be immediately visible, but it feels like it's coming from the same school, and it has the uniformity of the content that you have throughout the whole piece.
And finally, really, Danny, if we're sitting here this time next year, what might you be, I was going to say boasting about, but what might you be telling us that you've achieved in the year in AI terms? What might it be?
I think probably on the product side, I think there's lots of really interesting things that are happening, not just for us, but for lots of other publishers in the product space. And I would hope that we'd have a slightly different looking product. Maybe not this time next year. Maybe a year after I'll come back.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Danny.
Thanks for listening, and to Danny for joining us at the AI Forum. We've got some exciting events coming up this year, all of which you can see at voices.media/events. The most important one for now, though, is the Publisher Podcast Awards. They're now open for entries for our 7th year. There are some new categories, including, yes, Best Use of AI, and Best Daily Podcast, as well as the return of our staples. So more on that and the newsletter awards, which will be opening soon, at voices.media/events. And remember, if you want to read our key takeaways article or sign up to our newsletter, you can find both at voices.media. Next week, we'll be back with another interview with Sue McMillan about what AI means to Mumsnet. I'll see you then.